Let me share something with you that nobody explains to young men. When life hits you hard, you don't suddenly become strong. You don't rise to the moment. In fact, you do quite the opposite. You fall to whatever you already built inside of yourself, whatever convictions you have now or what you're going to fall back on when things get hard. In the military, it's called falling back to your highest level of training. Navy SEALs will tell you that the success of an operation is determined by how well they prepared ahead of time before things got dicey, before the battlefield becomes a two-way range. In a similar way, unless a man prepares in advance, most won't be prepared to deal with adversity or hardship or conflict. That's because most men don't know what they truly believe until the pressure is already crushing them. But then it's too late. You find yourself in a battle unarmed and unprepared. Today, I want to show you how to build convictions before life tests you, not after. How to arm yourself before you step onto the battlefield. Because life is coming, and sometimes it gets hard. There's a quiet lie in our culture. It says, when the moment comes, you'll figure it out. When temptation shows up, when fear hits, when your job is on the line, when your friends pressure you, when following God suddenly costs something, you'll just rise to it. That sounds nice, but it's not true. Pressure doesn't create character, it reveals it. Life doesn't build the man, it exposes the man. Now, you've probably heard that adversity builds character, but it isn't as black and white as that. You see, adversity does not create character from nothing, it reveals what is already there. And then it strengthens or breaks it depending on what it finds. And if nothing solid is there, something else will take over. Fear, the desire for approval, comfort, self-preservation. That's why we need to talk about convictions. And we need to talk about them before life gets hard, before you're presented with hard choices. And most people think that convictions are nothing more than strong opinions. They're not. An opinion says, I think this is right. A conviction says, I know what is right. I know what I believe and why. It says, I will suffer before I betray this. That's the difference. Convictions are pre-decided loyalty. They answer questions before life asks them. Questions like, will I lie to protect myself? Will I compromise to fit in? Will I walk away from money to save my soul? Will I obey God if it costs friends or society's approval? If you don't decide now, life will decide for you. And it will not be gentle. Choices, good and bad, have consequences. Daniel was a young Jewish exile taken to Babylon after Jerusalem had fallen. He served in foreign royal courts, yet remained faithful to God under intense pressure. In Daniel chapter 1, we read that his city was destroyed. He was taken captive. His future was uncertain. He's offered comfort, education, and status. Everything a young man at that time would have wanted. And then we read this. In Daniel 1:8, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. Resolved, meaning the decision had already been made. Daniel already had an answer before the question was even asked. Let me say it again. Daniel resolved not to defile himself. Not in the presence of a king, not under pressure, not in public. Before Babylon tested him, he already knew what his response would be. And it is his response that explains why he later survives political betrayal, the threat of execution, and even the lion's den. His strength in public was built in private. And as Jesus said in Luke 16:10, whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. God trains men quietly before he tests them publicly. You see, small obediences build large stability. Let me give you a more modern example. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German pastor during Hitler's rise. When the Nazis began twisting the church to support their regime, most pastors stayed quiet. It was safer, more comfortable, more reasonable in their minds. But Bonhoeffer was not like most pastors. Instead of taking the safe and secure route that so many others had taken, he stood up to the Nazis. He stood on principle, unwavering principle. He was resolved to do the right thing no matter how strong the opposition was. And in 1930s Germany, the opposition was very strong. Bonhoeffer didn't suddenly become brave when Hitler took power. He had already decided that he would obey God and not the state. That conviction cost him. It cost him his career, it cost him his freedom, and eventually it cost him his life. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was executed just weeks before the war ended. History remembers him. Most of the men who compromised, they're forgotten. Same pressure, different foundation, different convictions. Let me speak plainly for a minute. Most young men are not afraid of pain, not physical at least. They're afraid of being alone, of being mocked and ridiculed, being left behind, being seen as irrelevant. So they trade their convictions for acceptance. They become flexible instead of anchored in truth. But here's the truth. You will never respect yourself for a compromise you made to be liked. Never. You might survive socially, but inside something fractures and you will feel it. There's a saying that there's no shortage of bravery on the battlefield, but there is a shortage of bravery in the boardroom. So how can we build these convictions? What are some practical steps that you can take to do that? Well, here's a few that I suggest. And these aren't motivational fog or shallow platitudes. They're real steps. Step 1, write your non-negotiables. Actually write them down on a piece of paper. Don't type them in a computer. Don't think of them in your head. Write them down. And what I'm talking about are things like this. I will not lie to protect myself. Or I will not cheat even if everyone else does. I will not mock God to fit in. I will not abandon my family or principles for success or to make a few extra bucks. Now, these are just some examples. You have to write down your convictions. Again, write them down. Actually, give it some thought and write these down. Step 2, anchor them in Scripture. Not feelings, not personalities, not your truth, but the truth. An example, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that comes from Joshua chapter 24. Now, it's not just your preference, it's your allegiance. Step 3, practice obedience in small things. You see, convictions are like muscles. They will grow stronger under resistance. Tell the truth when it costs little. Say no when it's uncomfortable. Walk away when staying would be easier. You are rehearsing for the future when it gets tough, when you're under real pressure. And step 4, expect to lose things. If your convictions cost you nothing, they are nothing but decorations, window treatments, not foundations. Now, you will lose some opportunities. You'll lose some relationships, you'll lose some comfort, but you'll gain self-respect, peace, stability, and authority. In my book, that's a fair trade. Now, you could do nothing, but doing nothing has a cost. Doing so will result in you becoming a man who explains away everything, who justifies weaknesses, who blames circumstances, who quietly despises and loathes himself. Now, you'll function, but you don't stand for anything. And if you don't stand for anything, you stand for nothing. And deep down, that will eat at your soul. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to dominate the room. You don't need to be aggressive, and you don't need to be immovable. Quiet men with convictions hold their families together. They anchor churches. They stabilize communities, and they shape history, just like Dietrich Bonhoeffer did. Build the man now that you will need later, because life is coming, not to ask who you are, but to find out. If this helped you, please come back again, not for motivation, but for alignment. And please don't wait to implement these suggestions, because convictions are built long before they are tested, and you never know when the test will come. I'm Dennis Gill, and this is the Faith and Fortitude Project. Thank you very much for watching to the end. If you got something out of this, please hit the like button and share this with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Remember, faith first, fortitude always. Now let's get after it.